The deadbolt woke me at 2:10 on a Tuesday morning. 40 years of fitting locks for a living, and I can tell you what every one of them sounds like in the dark. This one was being turned slowly, by someone who didn't want to be heard. I'm 64. My name's Lester, though most folk around Tauranga just call me Les. I found my partner standing at my front door with her good coat on and an overnight bag in her hand, and when she saw me in the hallway she didn't look ashamed. She looked irritated. Like I was the one doing something wrong by being awake in my own home. You don't own me, Les, she said. I'll be back when I feel like it. I just nodded. Didn't say a word. She walked out and pulled the door shut behind her, and I stood there in my dressing gown listening to her heels on the path. She thought she'd won something that night. What she didn't know was that when she finally felt like coming back, I wouldn't be the one waiting for her. The one person in this world she was genuinely afraid of would be sitting in my lounge with a cup of tea going cold in front of him, and there'd be no door left for her to flounce out of. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the before. I spent 41 years in the security trade. Started as an apprentice locksmith in Christchurch in the late 70s, ended up running my own firm installing alarm systems and access control for half the commercial buildings in the Bay of Plenty. I sold the business when I turned 62. My wife had passed 3 years before that, cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the funeral, and after I sold up, I'll be honest with you, the quiet in the house was a thing with weight. You could feel it sitting in the chairs. My whole working life was reading risk. You walk into a building and you see the camera blind spots, the door that doesn't latch properly, the window someone's wedged open for a smoke. I was good at it. Which makes what happened next properly embarrassing, because the worst security breach of my life walked in through my own front door, and I held it open for her. Her name was Marlene. She was 56 when we met, at a line dancing night at the club that one of the ladies from my old Bulls team dragged me along to. Marlene was loud and funny and wore colors like she was daring the room to say something. She called herself a free spirit. She'd say it the way other people say their job title. Twice divorced, no kids, worked here and there doing the books for a couple of small businesses, though as far as I could tell the work was occasional and the spending was not. I thought she was a tonic. That's the honest truth of it. After 3 years of eating my tea standing up at the bench because sitting at the table alone was worse, here was this woman filling the place with noise. My daughter, she's 40, lives in Wellington with her husband and my 2 grandkids. She met Marlene exactly twice, and after the second time she rang me and said, "Dad. A woman who's 56 and has nothing to show for it but stories, did you ever ask yourself why?" I should have. That's the part one own. A man my age, in my trade, knows that a door with a history of break-ins doesn't need a nicer welcome mat, it needs a better lock. But I was lonely, and loneliness will make a clever man stupid faster than drink will. I looked at the red flags and I filed them under personality. She moved into my townhouse about 8 months in. Her idea. Her flat lease was up and she made it sound like a great romantic step forward, building a proper life together. I agreed on one condition, because I'm not a fool entirely, she'd put in a fixed amount each fortnight toward the power and groceries. Nothing flash. Less than she'd been paying in rent by a long way. The money came late the first fortnight. Came short the second. By the third month it wasn't coming at all, just excuses with nice handwriting. A client hadn't paid her. Her car needed work. I let it slide, every time. In my old line of work we had a phrase for that, accepting a known vulnerability. You write it in the report and the client ignores it, and then they ring you after the burglary wanting to know how it happened. The late nights started in the autumn. She'd be off to girls' nights that ran till 1, 2 in the morning. She'd come home smelling of cigarettes, she told me she'd quit years ago, and somebody else's beer. When I asked, calm as you like, where she'd been, she'd flare up like I'd struck a match near her. I was suffocating her. I was controlling. I was acting like her warden. Funny thing, that. I never raised my voice once. But a person who's doing wrong will hear an accusation and a question about the weather. Then came that Tuesday night. The slow deadbolt. The coat and the bag. Asterisk, you don't own me, Les. I'll be back when I feel like it. Asterisk, she was right, as it happens. I didn't own her. But she'd forgotten that the arrangement ran both ways, and she'd just told me, in plain English at 2 in the morning, exactly what I was to her. I wasn't a partner. I was a facility. A warm, paid-for facility with good locks and a soft old fool on the door. The hurt was real, I won't pretend otherwise. I sat on the end of the bed for a while in the dark and let it go through me. A man's allowed that. But somewhere around 2:30, 40 years of professional habit stood up, dusted itself off, and quietly took over. There'd been a breach. The asset, my home, my peace, what was left of my retirement, was compromised. And I knew how to handle a breach. I'd done it for a living since before she'd left school. I didn't ring her. I didn't text. I made a pot of tea and a list. First job, the perimeter. I'd fitted my own townhouse with the same access system I used to install commercially, electronic deadlatch, coded entry, the lot. I sat down at my computer at 3 in the morning in my dressing gown and deleted her entry code. Changed the master code. Disabled the spare fob she kept in her car. By the time the jug boiled, she couldn't get into the property with anything short of a crowbar, and the cameras would tell me if she tried. Second job, the accounts. Her phone was on my plan, her idea, it's cheaper, love. Streaming subscriptions, mine. The little card I'd given her for groceries, mine. I spent an hour closing doors. Removed her as an authorized user on everything. Each password I changed felt like turning off a tap that had been dripping money down a drain for the better part of 2 years. The third job was the one she'd never see coming, and I'll admit I sat with my tea for a long while before I made the call, because it was the only part of the plan that required another human being. See, in 2 years, I'd learned a fair bit about Marlene, mostly from Marlene, who liked to talk about herself the way some people like to talk about the rugby. And the one subject that shut her up, the one name that made her change the channel, was her older brother. Quentin. 68, retired detective senior sergeant, 35 years in the police down in Invercargill. Their parents died young, and he'd half-raised her, and by her telling he was rigid, judgmental, impossible. By the facts that leaked out around the edges of her stories, he'd also bailed her out of 2 bankruptcies, paid off a loan shark in the 90s, covered her rent more times than anyone had counted, and finally, 5 years ago, told her she'd not get another cent from him and she'd stop speaking to him out of spite. She wasn't afraid of him because he was cruel. She was afraid of him because he was the only person alive who had her complete file, so to speak. You can't spin a story to the man who attended every previous incident. I had his number from when he'd rung the house once, the Christmas before, trying to patch things up with her. She'd refused the call and I'd taken his details, thinking one day I might quietly nudge a reconciliation. Well, one day had come, just not the way I'd pictured it. It was nearly 3:30, but a career copper answers his phone. Second ring. Quentin speaking. Quentin, it's Les. Marlene's partner, up in Tauranga. I apologize for the hour. But there's a situation with your sister, and I think you're the right man to hear it. I gave it to him the way I used to give security reports. No emotion, no editorial. The money. The nights. The lie about quitting smoking, which sounds petty until you understand it, was the thread that showed me the whole jersey was unraveling. And then tonight, the bag, the coat, the line about being back when she felt like it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he let out a breath that sounded about 30 years old. She did this to her second husband, he said. Near enough word for word. He rang me too, you know. From a motel. I'm not ringing you from a motel, I said. I'm in my own home and she's not getting back into it. The relationship's finished. But she'll come back in a few days when the fun runs dry or the money does, and when she finds the code's changed she'll make a scene in my lobby, And then she'll start ringing everyone we know with a story where I'm the villain. I've seen how she edits things. I want a witness here who can't be edited. And frankly, Quentin, she's going to need somewhere to go, and I'd rather it was family than a park bench. I'm cross with her, not cruel. What are you proposing? I'll box her things up, careful and proper. You come up. When she lands, you're here. You take her home with you, and whatever happens after that is family business, not mine. Another pause. When do you reckon she'll show? She said she'll be back when she feels like it. I'd say Friday. Saturday if someone else is paying. I'll fly up Thursday, he said, and that was that. He arrived Thursday morning. Big quiet man, ironed shirt, handshake like a vice that had learned its manners. He stood in my hallway and looked around the way I look at buildings, taking inventory, and then he said, "You've kept a tidy home, Les." I'm sorry she didn't respect it. We spent the day packing her life into boxes, and I'll tell you, that was an education. I did the work myself, my house, my mess to clean, and I wanted to be able to say every box was packed decent and nothing of hers was damaged or kept. Quentin sat at the kitchen table mostly, labeling, making tea, telling me things. But it was me that found a shoebox in the wardrobe with the credit card statements. For cards I'd never heard of, all maxed. And a hire purchase agreement for a television I'd never seen, at an address I didn't recognize, which answered a question I hadn't quite let myself ask about where the girls' nights ended up. Quentin looked at the statements for a long time. She'll have been telling you she had no money for the groceries. Every fortnight. And meanwhile. He tapped the papers, didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. She came back Friday afternoon. 70-some hours after the deadbolt. My phone buzzed, motion at the front door, then her code failing, once, twice, 5 times. Then the knocking started. Then my phone started ringing, and when I didn't pick up, the texts. Angry first. What have you done to the door? Then confused. Les, is this a joke? Then the pleading. Asterisk, my phone's nearly dead. I've got nowhere to go. Just open the door so we can talk. Asterisk, I sat in my lounge with her brother and we let the phone buzz itself out on the coffee table. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen, looked at me, and answered it on speaker. Gwen. Her voice was shaking, half tears, all performance. Something's wrong with Les, he's locked me out. I think he's having some kind of episode. Can you ring him? He's not having an episode, Marlene, Quentin said. I'm sitting in his lounge. I had been in this world 64 years and I have never heard a silence like that one. It went on so long I checked the call hadn't dropped. Come to the door, he said. It's open now. She stood in my hallway 2 minutes later looking like all the air had been let out of her. The coat was the same one from Tuesday night. The defiance from Tuesday night was nowhere to be found. Her eyes went from me to her brother to the boxes stacked neat along the wall with her name on them in his block capitals, and I watched her run the numbers and come up with nothing. You rang my brother? She finally managed, and the anger came back into it. You had no right. He had every right, Quentin said, level as a spirit bulb. It's his home. You told the man you'd come and go as you pleased, so he's taken you at your word. You've gone. That's the end of it. She tried everything in the kid after that. Tears. Then the speech about how I'd never understood her free spirit. Then, when that got nothing, she turned to me soft and said, Les, love, I made a mistake, I was silly, 20 good months and you'd throw it away over one daft night? And I'll admit, the old lonely fool in me twitched. But I'd spent Thursday reading 4 credit card statements and a hire purchase agreement, so I just said, it's done, Marlene. Your brother's been good enough to take you in. I'd thank him if I were you. It's more than your night out earned you. She flew south with him the next morning. I drove them to the airport myself, because I'm cross, not cruel, and I shook Quentin's hand at the drop-off and she wouldn't look at me, and that was the last I ever saw of her in person. The follow-up came in pieces over the months, mostly through Quentin, who rings me now and again, We've become unlikely mates, the locksmith and the detective. Down in Invercargill she'd lasted 3 weeks of his house rules before the storm broke. He'd sat her down with the statements and made her go through every line. No rescue this time, just a repayment plan and a part-time job at a garden center that he drove her to himself the first week so she couldn't sleep through it. She told anyone who'd listen that I'd ruined her life. One of her Taranga friends, Janelle, the quiet one of the bunch, actually rang me to apologize. We all knew about the other fella, Les. We told her she was mad. You're the third bloke she's done this to, and you're the first one who didn't pay for the privilege of being left. The other fella, for the record, was a part owner of a bar in the Mount, and he stopped returning her calls the same week her brother cancelled her cards. There's a lesson in that too, about what a free spirit is worth to people when the freedom stops being subsidized. About 4 months on, an email turned up from an address I didn't know. Long one. Asterisk, you were my rock and I didn't appreciate it. I've changed. I'm finally growing up. Can we just talk? Asterisk, every sentence had an excuse folded inside it, her childhood, her ex-husbands, her brother, anyone in the world but the woman doing the typing. I read it twice, and I deleted it, and I'll tell you why without any bitterness at all. People don't change because a door got locked on them. They change when they admit they're the one who walked out of it. There wasn't one line in that email that said I'm sorry, Les, not one. And me? My daughter and the grandkids came up for the school holidays and the house was full of the right kind of noise. I've gone back to bowls. And I've been keeping company lately with a widow from the club, retired school principal, sharp as a tack and straight as a ruler. She stays over some weekends, and on Sunday mornings she's there in the kitchen at 7, doing the crossword out loud and burning the toast, and I wouldn't trade that ordinary racket for all the free spirits in the country. Nobody sneaks anywhere. Nobody needs to. If you're an older fella on your own and you've read this far, take the lesson cheaper than I bought it. Loneliness is a real ache, but it's a worse advisor. Don't let an empty house talk you into ignoring what your own eyes are telling you. Watch what people do with the small things, the $20, the small promise, the little lie about cigarettes, because how a person handles the small things is exactly how they'll handle you. And remember that respecting your own home isn't controlling, it isn't suffocating, and it isn't negotiable. It's the rent everybody pays, including the people we love. Marlene told me I didn't own her, and she was dead right. But she didn't own me either, and she didn't own my house, my pension, or my peace of mind. The moment she forgot that, the game was over. She just walked out the door before she heard the lock turn. I've been thinking about this whole business a fair bit since it wrapped up, and what strikes me most isn't the drama of it, the 2 a.m. confrontation, the boxes in the hallway, the look on Marlene's face when she heard her brother's voice on that speaker. What strikes me is how long the story was actually being written before either of us knew it. That's the thing about cause and effect. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on the door and say, right, here we are, this is where your choices are catching up with you. It just accumulates quietly, one small act at a time, until one day the weight of it tips the scales and you're standing in a hallway at 2 in the morning realizing that every late payment, every excuse, every small lie about cigarettes, every defensive flare-up when a reasonable question got asked, all of it was building toward a single inevitable morning. Marlene used to say things happened to her. The truth is, things happened from her. And that difference is everything. I'm not saying I was blameless in how long I let it go on. I wasn't. Loneliness does something to your judgment, and I let it. I'd catch a red flag and file it away because filing it away felt better than dealing with what it meant. That's a failure of honesty, with myself, mostly. Tricky thing about honesty is it costs you something up front. You have to sit with an uncomfortable truth before you get to act on it. Most of us, if we're being straight, would rather delay that discomfort indefinitely and call it giving someone a fair chance. But intelligence isn't just about being clever with systems and locks, which I always thought I was pretty good at. Real intelligence, the kind that actually protects you, is about reading the pattern in front of you without letting what you want to see get in the way of what's there. The pattern with Marlene was plain enough. I just hadn't built up the nerve to read it plainly. When I finally did, on that Tuesday night, I didn't rage. I didn't beg. I just got quiet and got to work, and I'd like to think that's the part worth keeping for anyone who finds themselves in a similar spot. There's no dignity in losing your head. There's a great deal of it in knowing exactly what to do and doing it steadily. The resilience part is this: the months after she left were not all easy. There were mornings when the house felt too quiet again, and I'd catch myself wondering whether I'd been too hard, too fast, too final. That voice is a liar, but it's a persistent one. What got me through it wasn't anger. Anger is exhausting to carry. It was simply deciding, deliberately and daily, that my peace of mind was worth protecting, same as any other asset. And that slowly, it becomes true. You decide something is worth protecting, and then you protect it, and then one morning you realize you're not deciding it anymore because it just is. Quentin rings me every few weeks now. We've become proper mates, which I never would have predicted. He told me recently that Marlene's doing all right, not thriving, not transformed, but getting on, paying her own bills, keeping the job. I don't wish her anything worse than that. Honestly. I hope she finds her way to a version of herself she can be straight with, because that's the only version that will ever be at peace, regardless of who she's with or where she lives. And the woman who burns the toast on Sunday mornings and reads the crossword out loud? She makes me feel like 64 might be one of the better chapters yet.